In this medical malpractice lawsuit, I tried to get doctor number 2 to point a finger at what doctor number 1 did and claim that it was doctor number 1 who caused my client all these injuries. You think I was successful? You want to know the answer? Come join me on this walk through the neighborhood as I tell you, and whether I was able to get the answers that I wanted. Hi, I'm Gerry Oginski. I'm a New York medical malpractice and personal injury attorney. Okay, I was in the middle of questioning a doctor in a medical malpractice case where my client had sued 2 different doctors. We were arguing that both doctors were careless and both contributed to my client's injuries. So now I'm in the process of questioning doctor number 2. At a previous time, I had an opportunity to question doctor number 1, and I knew exactly what doctor number 1 had done and why. Now I'm questioning doctor number 2, and it was our claim that both of these doctors failed to do what they should have done, and now that they failed to communicate with each other. And had they done that, they would have picked up and recognized what the other one did not do. During the course of questioning doctor number 2, one of my goals during this pretrial question and answer session that lawyers also call an examination before trial was to see if she was going to point a finger at doctor number 1. Now, traditionally, that never ever happens, right? Because the defense, the attorneys who represent the doctors in these lawsuits, especially when there's more than one doctor or more than one hospital involved, they never want to turn around and point fingers at each other. Why not? They'd rather point fingers at you, the injured patient, my client, the injured victim. Why? Because they want to deflect attention from what they did into what my client did or didn't do. If the doctors are pointing fingers at each other, then we just have to sit back and watch the 2 defendants or more, the doctors who are being sued or the hospital staff, point fingers and argue amongst themselves as to who is really responsible for my client's injuries. We love when that happens. It doesn't happen often, but when it does, we love when that happens. Now, that was my goal, to try and get doctor number 2 to point a finger at doctor number 1. I will tell you that the defense attorneys are very, very smart, and they're very savvy. And when they prep their clients prior to giving this testimony, this pretrial deposition, they will always tell the doctors, do not point a finger at the hospital, don't point a finger at the co-defendant, the other doctors in this case, because if you do, it's going to make things miserable, absolutely miserable for the defense of this case. So rarely do we see it happen where one doctor will point a finger at a second doctor. Now, I've been doing this more than 33 years, and I will tell you, I can count on one single hand the number of times that I've actually seen this happen. And I'll tell you a quick story where it did happen, and then I'll come back to this case where it didn't happen. In this case where it did happen, I'm in the middle of questioning an obstetrician in a case involving significant injuries to a baby as a result of improper medical care and treatment during this mother's labor and delivery. During the course of that deposition, I'm asking the obstetrician questions about what he did and why. During this testimony, the doctor turns to me and says, you know, I'm also a victim here. I said, excuse me? He said, yes, I am also the victim here, not just your client, the injured patient, and the injured baby. I said, what are you talking about, doctor? He said, I'm the victim here because the nurses here, in this particular case, failed to alert me to the problem that your client was having, that the baby's heart rate had dropped, and nobody came in to tell me about it. In this particular case that I'm referring to, the doctor clearly pointed a finger not just at the hospital staff, the nurses, the labor and delivery nurses, but the entire labor floor for failing to alert him to an ongoing problem. He said, had these nurses alerted me to the fact that this patient, your client, was suffering these problems, I would have immediately left my other patient, come in and done an emergency C-section, and this baby would not have suffered the problems and the damages and injuries that she ultimately did. That was amazing. I had never in my career seen such testimony. I had never heard such testimony. It was remarkable because the attorney who represented this obstetrician didn't care that he was pointing fingers at the hospital. They had different interests. So he didn't mind the fact that this doctor was clearly pointing a finger at the hospital. So getting back to the title of this video, when I asked doctor number 2 whether doctor number 1 caused and contributed to my client's injuries, you know what she said? She said, I have no opinion. I said, doctor, do you have an opinion with a reasonable degree of medical certainty whether any treatment rendered by doctor number 1 caused my client harm and injury? I have no opinion. Doctor, at the time that this incident happened and my client did suffer injuries, did you have an opinion as to whether doctor number 1 caused or contributed to those injuries? I had no opinion at that time. Doctor, did you have a discussion with doctor number 1 as to why this patient suffered the following injuries? Yes, I did. And during that discussion, did you come to a conclusion as to whether doctor number 1 caused or contributed to those injuries? Now the defense lawyer pipes up, screams out, "Objection!" I direct my client not to answer that question. And you know what? The defense attorney would be well within his right to do that. Why? Because the law in New York permits the defense attorney to prevent his client from answering a question about whether another doctor who is also caring for the patient caused or contributed to these injuries. Now you might be wondering why. Why would the law allow him to stop his client from answering such an important question? I'll tell you why. He doesn't want his client to literally point fingers at doctor number 1 because he knows at the moment that happens, doctor number 1 is going to turn around and point fingers right back at him. Well, I didn't do this. The reason I did is because you didn't call me and tell me about these problems. And now it creates a dilemma for the defense of this case. They no longer have a unified defense. And that's going to make a problem for both defendants, both doctors in this case. There is law in New York that allows me the opportunity to ask doctor number 2 whether he feels that doctor number 1's treatment was appropriate and whether it caused my client harm and injury. If the doctors are working together to treat the patient as a team, then yes, I am permitted to ask those questions. However, most defense attorneys, even though they know about this particular case and similar cases, will do everything they can do to try and prevent the doctor from answering those questions. Because they know that once the doctor actually admits and acknowledges that yes, doctor number 1 caused and contributed to those injuries, that's it, they've got problems, and now they're going to be looking to try to settle this case rather than trying to defend this case all the way through trial. So why do I share this quick information with you? I share it with you just to give you an insight and an understanding into what really goes on in these medical malpractice cases in New York. You know, I recognize you probably have questions or concerns about your own matter. Well, if your matter did happen in New York and you're thinking about bringing a lawsuit, but haven't done so yet because you still have questions that need to be answered, what I invite you to do is pick up the phone and call me. You know, I answer questions like yours every single day, and I'd love to chat with you. You can reach me at 516-487-8207 or by email at Gerry, Gerry, at Oginski-law.com. Well, that's it for today's video. I'm Gerry Oginski. Have a fantastic day.